There's a part of all of us that needs to win. Not the argument, but the moment. We call it confidence. We call it strength. But most of the time, it's just ego trying not to feel small. And ego is expensive. Ego doesn't show up when things are calm. It appears when something touches your pride, when someone questions you, interrupts you, disagrees with you, and suddenly, being understood isn't enough. You need to be right. The strange thing about ego is that it feels like protection. It tells you, if I don't defend myself, I'll lose respect. But most of the time, you lose more respect by defending too much. There's a subtle shift. It happens so fast you almost miss it. A conversation starts normally, calm, curious, balanced, and then someone disagrees, not aggressively, not disrespectfully, just differently, and something tightens. You don't just want to explain yourself. You want to correct them, not to understand, but to secure your position. The tone changes. Your voice becomes firmer. Your thoughts move faster. You start organizing arguments, preparing counters, anticipating resistance. And without realizing it, the goal of the conversation shifts. It's no longer about clarity. It's about dominance. About making sure you're not the one who backs down. Because backing down feels like losing, and losing feels personal. But here's the truth. Most of us don't admit. We don't always need to win the discussion. We need to win the feeling. The feeling of being respected, the feeling of being competent, the feeling of being in control. And that need is rarely about the topic. It's about identity. The need to win isn't loud at first. It whispers, "Don't let this slide. Don't let that stand. Make sure they know." And before you notice, you're not participating anymore. You're competing, even with people you care about. And competition changes energy. It narrows perspective. It reduces curiosity. It turns dialogue into a battlefield where someone must stand taller and someone must shrink. Ego doesn't show up when we feel secure. It appears when something touches our identity, when someone questions our opinion, our decision, our competence. And suddenly, we're not just defending an idea, we're defending ourselves. The strange thing is, ego often disguises itself as confidence. It sounds firm, it sounds certain, but certainty isn't always strength. Sometimes it's fear with better posture. You can win with ego. You can win arguments. You can win debates. You can dominate rooms. But something shifts. People start choosing their words carefully. They hesitate before disagreeing. They stop offering correction. And you think you've earned respect. But what you've created is distance. Distance doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, one conversation at a time, until one day, you realize no one challenges you anymore, and growth dies quietly. There's something we rarely admit. Being wrong feels like exposure, not intellectual exposure, emotional exposure, like someone just peeled back the image you carefully built. We spend years constructing who we believe we are, competent, capable, certain. And when someone challenges that, it doesn't just touch an opinion, it touches identity. That's why ego reacts so quickly, because it confuses correction with humiliation. It hears disagreement as disrespect, and it fights, not for truth, but for safety. But here's the irony. The people who are not afraid to be wrong are the hardest to shake. They don't collapse when corrected. They don't escalate when questioned. They adjust. And adjusting isn't weakness, it's flexibility. And flexibility is strength that doesn't snap. If you can sit in a moment where you might be wrong and not rush to defend yourself, you've already stepped beyond ego, because ego needs certainty. Growth needs humility. And humility requires a quiet kind of courage. There's another way to exist, a way that doesn't panic when challenged, a way that doesn't rush to defend every point. Confidence, real confidence, doesn't need every moment to confirm it. It can say, "You might be right," and mean it. It can listen without preparing a counterattack. It can pause, without feeling threatened. That kind of presence is rare and powerful, not because it wins, but because it builds trust. Most of us don't even notice when ego takes over because it feels normal. It feels justified. You interrupt because you think you're clarifying. You explain again because you think you weren't understood. You push harder because you think you're being ignored. But sometimes you're not clarifying. You're defending. And defense is rarely calm. It carries tension. It carries urgency. It carries the quiet fear that if you don't speak now, you'll lose something. Respect, authority, position. The habit of defending yourself in every small disagreement slowly reshapes your personality. You become quicker to react, less curious, more certain, less open. And the dangerous part is, it feels like strength. But strength that needs constant defense isn't stable. It's fragile. Real stability doesn't brace for impact in every conversation. It doesn't assume attack where there is none. It doesn't need to guard every word. Sometimes, the most mature response is simply not escalating, not correcting every detail, not proving every point, not defending every version of who you think you are. Because the more you protect an image, the less room you leave for growth. There's a quiet moment in every disagreement, a small space where you can feel ego rising. It's subtle, a tightening in the chest, a shift in tone, a sudden need to respond immediately. That moment is a crossroads. You can follow the impulse, or you can pause, and that pause changes everything. It feels uncomfortable at first, almost unnatural, because ego is fast and humility is slow. But when you choose not to react, when you choose to listen longer, when you choose to sit with the discomfort of possibly being wrong, something shifts. You stop performing and you start understanding. You stop defending and you start observing. You stop trying to win and you start trying to connect. That shift doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet, but over time, those quiet decisions reshape who you are, not louder, but steadier, not dominant, but grounded, not defensive, but secure. And that kind of presence is felt immediately. People relax around it. They speak honestly. They challenge you without fear, because they know you're not fighting to protect ego. You're there to understand. And maybe that's where it really changes. Not in the argument, not in the moment you almost reacted, but in the moment you didn't. The moment you felt ego rise and chose not to follow it. The moment you let the silence stay instead of filling it. The moment you didn't need to prove anything. Because the truth is, ego always wants confirmation. It wants reassurance. It wants to feel solid. But character doesn't need applause. Character doesn't panic when questioned. It doesn't tighten when challenged. It doesn't collapse when corrected. It listens. It considers. It adjusts. And then it moves forward without making the moment about itself. The cost of ego isn't just conflict. It's the quiet erosion of connection. But the reward for restraint is something deeper. Respect that isn't forced. Trust that isn't negotiated. Presence that doesn't compete. And over time, those small choices to pause, to listen, to not defend every inch of who you think you are, become identity. Not louder, but steadier. Not dominant, but grounded. Because being right is temporary, but being trusted lasts. And maybe that's what's actually worth protecting. Not pride, but character.